Okay, show business.
Okay, good morning. We will call the public meeting for the Butler County Board of Commissioners on Wednesday, May 15th, 2020 to order at that we stand for the morning of Charlie Sarah and
Will, would you like to read do you have the piece here available on public comment?
For those of you who intend to speak today during the public comment session or subsequent near the end of the meeting in the general comment portion, we'd ask that the Butler counties that you follow the policies of the Butler County, which is the commissioners have established a public comment portion. The portion of this meeting, basically, you should state your name, your address. It's limited to residents and taxpayers of Butler County, and the comments should be on matters of general concern, official action or deliberation, which are or may be taken in today's meeting. They should be items that are specifically set forth within the agenda, and I'd remind you that your presentation is limited to 3 minutes. We will keep the time up here. Okay?
Thank you. First.
So who was for, Mr. Smith, Daniel Smith? And just please state your, again, restate your name for the record and your residential address, please.
Thank you. My name is Daniel Smith Jr. and you want the full address?
No, you just
okay, just Adams Township.
That's good.
Mars, PA. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak here.
Sorry.
5 is the number of friends and loved ones our family has seen succumb to this dreadful pandemic. 8 is the number of close friends who have had to step away from their small businesses in order to comply with the governor's stay-at-home order. That's just my life. So I'm sure if we go around the room, we'll have individuals who can name at least one person they know in either of those categories. Today we're here to discuss an action that pretty much ignores sacrifices made by the 13 people that I know and countless others have made in order to keep our fellow citizens safe. For the past 5 weeks, we have seen our politicians squander away valuable time to work the problem, instead placing economic growth over health. Now, since they can't get their way, they go to the last resort afforded to them, lawsuit. What we've seen so far of this path, PA Supreme Court ruled in favor of the governor's actions. The U.S. Supreme Court dismissed the case altogether, therefore upholding the previous ruling, and once again we're at square one. This time, I can speak as a citizen of the county and ask you to please stop this madness. Yes, people want to go back to work, and we are seeing that happen this Friday per the governor's movement of Butler County into the yellow phase. So why the lawsuit? Because it's not quick enough? Most claim this isn't politically motivated, but I beg to differ, because where was my call to be included? I'm a candidate running for office. I'm not able to run the type of campaign I feel is necessary, yet I don't see one Democratic candidate on this filing. You have the opportunity to make a difference, to let the people of Butler County know we have made significant strides in battling this pandemic. To move ahead with this lawsuit is a waste of our tax dollars, resources we can use to continue fighting to keep the numbers low, and to be able to work together to safely reopen the economy. We have survived and built ourselves up from low points in our past. Why is this different? I'm confident in the leadership of my commissioners and highly respect the jobs they have done at this point. Don't let this one action have the many positive steps you've shown together be the one you look back on and say, if I only had to do it over again. Don't let those who lost loved ones feel that their government has turned their back on them. They didn't choose to perish. And I'm sure that if they could be here now, they would say, keep fighting the fight. I know my dearly departed friends would. So on behalf of them, as a citizen of Butler County, a taxpayer, and a person who has suffered financially and personally during this pandemic, I humbly ask that you do the right thing. Vote no. We will get through this together. There is no right or wrong answer, and our governor and health secretary have done the very best they can during these uncertain times. There is no right or wrong answers. But if we work together, we survive together. And we can all have our lives to enjoy making a livelihood once again. Thank you for your time and for all each of you have done these past several weeks as the team.
Next, under agenda item comment, Mr. Phil Heasley.
Morning, Commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for having us today. I'm here today to speak on behalf of me being a citizen of Center Township here in Butler County, and also a business owner in Butler Township here in Butler County, as well as a candidate here in part of Butler County. First of all, as a citizen, I am shocked to see the county wasting so much precious time and resources during this pandemic time that they could be helping these businesses prepare for when we do need to open. And this is not the right time when we're starting the opening phase this Friday to start suing the government to reopen. We're already starting that phase. As a business owner, my family owns Butler Gymnastics Club here in Butler Township. We have over 300 families that we have to be responsible for, as well as 25 employees. And when we think about our business reopening, we have to think about those 400 families plus the 25 families and how to keep them safe inside of our business. And we're not ready for that. We don't have any guidance about how to do that yet. We haven't seen anything. And we're just trying to listen to what the experts are saying and what the scientists are saying. And correct me if I'm wrong, nobody on this lawsuit is a scientist. And I haven't seen any data within this lawsuit providing, supporting why you guys are moving ahead with this lawsuit. And that's just shocking to me as a citizen and a business owner. And as a candidate, like Dan Smith just said, there's no Democratic candidates on this lawsuit. We weren't approached about this. We weren't asked about this. And I find that shocking. I find it shocking most of all that these other candidates are using the county's precious time, resources, and tax dollars being used in this lawsuit for a frivolous campaign moment and just to get their names out there. And that to me is just disrespectful to everybody who's out there fighting on the front lines right now to keep us safe. I just had surgery. I was in the hospital for a day. It was quick surgery, but I got to see all these people working so hard and how much they care and how much stress they're under. So we need to be supporting them, not doing these frivolous lawsuits right now. Thank you.
Next, under agenda item, Catherine Lalonde.
Hi, good morning. My name is Catherine Lalonde, and I live in Lancaster Township. I'm also the chair of the Democratic Committee in Butler County. Got to get the glasses going. Like many in the county, I was anticipating we would start our reopen this last Friday with other counties. So I was a little surprised. But, you know, I think one more week doesn't make that much difference. Well, I mean, I understand as a business owner it makes difference, but I've been communicating with Commissioner Boozle. He said that he had arranged a meeting for the three of you to discuss with the Secretary of Intergovernmental Affairs about what is the criteria for us to open and get more clarity on that. And for various reasons, all of a sudden, all these other county commissioners were brought into it. Butler County was allotted half an hour for the three of you to answer questions specific to Butler County, which is who your constituents are. I don't know of situations where usually people who represent a certain population worry about every other county around them. We just needed half an hour, and the other counties would have had their turn to get their specific questions opened. So we gave up that opportunity to get some clarification, which is what we stated we wanted, was more clarification about where we stood. The day after the lawsuit was filed, our county, along with other counties, were moved to start the yellow phase, which would happen in a few more days. And I don't see what the purpose of this suit is now. How much money will it cost the taxpayers of Butler County? The three other counties, plus the businesses who are on the lawsuit, there's been no discussion of how the costs would be distributed, and our county would still end up paying something no matter what. The other thing, as mentioned, there was the lawsuit brought by Danny DeVito in Allegheny, which has gone to the U.S. Supreme Court and was dismissed, which is basically the same lawsuit, as I understand it. Commissioners Oshie and Geyer have stated the suit aims to reform how states and counties work together, as well as reform the process of this for this type of emergency. But I don't believe that's best done through a lawsuit in the middle of a crisis. It should be done after the crisis is over, when local, state, and federal officials have data to review and can develop a policy. The businesses involved in this lawsuit are shut down because of the very nature in which they come in contact with many people in the public.
Time is little.
Oh my God, that went fast. I will give you the written one as well, so you can get over.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, I have Scott, and I'm sorry, Dittman. Okay.
We're 6 feet away, right? We're gonna stop.
Morning. I'm Scott Dittman, Howie Dittman to most people anymore, from Fairview Township, and I'd like to speak on agenda item H2, again, the civil action issue. I too have folks that have succumbed to this virus, know individuals that have, and those that are battling it. However, when we step back and look at the facts of it, until there's a vaccine, until there's a cure, the people who are going to get it are going to get it. The people who are going to struggle with it are going to struggle with it when there's no cure, when there's no vaccine. It's a question of how much we're going to spread that getting of it out, right? How much we're going to lower that curve. No one here needs a lecture on or a lesson on lowering that curve, right? However, you know, when we see those folks that are struggling with it right now, I apologize, I want to get back to my notes here before I get away from it. We have 8% of our vents right now, for example, in the state that are being used. And I'm certainly no way saying that we need to take that and drive that up through the roof, right? But if the goal is to keep it as low as possible for as long as possible, we will never reopen. We will never reopen. And I know some folks have said, you know, we're moving to yellow, and as you know, when you look at yellow, there's not a whole lot of difference between yellow when it comes to folks that are at risk, folks that are, prone to child abuse and things like that, and the businesses associated with that. But at the end of the day, the main thing I wanted to speak about is if you decide to move forward with this lawsuit, that you do it asking things to be framed the right way from the state, right? From the beginning, they said, what matters is hospitalizations. What matters is hospitalizations. All the reporting on are cases and deaths. They need to be transparent about the hospitalizations. They need to be transparent about what they said was important, which is a stress on those systems. Cases, we know for a fact that Butler is not testing folks who have a fever or who have a cough. You have to be struggling. So the cases numbers, we know they're wrong. We know they're wrong. They're probably way higher, which isn't a great thing. But at the end of the day, when we're told time and time again, it's the hospitalizations that matter. It's hospitalizations that matter. Why don't we have those numbers? Why aren't we looking at the actual stress on the system? We need you as a part of our voice to help control that control that conversation, because when we control that conversation and say, these are metrics we demand, and just lastly, because I'm probably running out of time because I can ramble all day. The last thing is, you know, folks are confused. I haven't met a single business owner yet who's upset about closing. It's because they don't understand why, if I need a chainsaw chain, I couldn't go to a store where there's maybe 2 other people and get my chainsaw chain. I now have to go to a place where anyone who needs milk or dog food or shampoo or tires, they're all in the same spot. That's it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
get the gist.
Thank you very much.
Next agenda item, Cindy Hildebrand.
Hi, I'm Cindy Hildebrand from Shakora Borough, and I'm going to talk about the lawsuit also. Thanks for letting me speak, but I'm a business owner. My husband's a business owner. We own several businesses, you guys know. We own several oil wells, hundreds of acres of farmland in this borough, in this county. So I'm concerned that you're going to go ahead with this lawsuit. What is it going to do for us? What is it going to do for the county? You guys were hired as public servants. I don't think, and I don't feel, that this is being a public servant. You're not looking at what's best for us. What are you going to get from this? Are you going to get us our money back? I can tell you that I've lost probably $20,000 to $30,000 a month from being closed, because it's a family restaurant. It's not a takeout restaurant. It's a breakfast restaurant. You know, I have friends, Smith Grove Campground, they've lost $20,000 a month. You know, not including their golf course, not including friends that have other golf courses that I know. We've lost several hundreds of $1,000s, all of us, and now you guys want to do a lawsuit. Who's going to pay for that lawsuit? Is it in the budget? $300 an hour, I'll say? I don't see that. I don't see where you have the money for that. We're going to have less grants this year because of money being spent elsewhere. You know, our kids are going to have to pay for whatever you do, because you're going to raise our property taxes as you have to spend this money on lawyer fees, because it's not going to be done in a month. It's not going to be done in 2 months. So I really want to know what this lawsuit's going to do. It's really got to do something, because whatever you guys want to do at this level, when this is all said and done with, I'm sure that the federal level is going to look at it and say, okay, where did we make our mistakes? Let's fix it. Let's do this. Let's put this law in. You guys aren't going to do that. I'm very concerned on where all this money is going to come from, because as soon as you raise taxes, now the blue collar men maybe have to work a little bit more overtime because they got to pay for their taxes. The senior citizens, they already struggle enough paying their taxes. And that means people are going to go out to eat a little bit less. They're going to golf a little bit less. They're going to buy less clothes a little bit less. I'm never going to recoup the money that we've lost. Never. So you're going to make it even 10 times harder on us. And it's going to be years before a lot of us are going to make this money even partially up. And then you have people in unemployment that aren't even getting money yet. I can tell you one of my girls applied a week after this happened, just got a notification that she can have unemployment. So now her bills are already behind. And then this is going to happen. I really don't see the fact of why you guys are doing this, unless you can all answer to us today. Why? What are you going to get from it? That you can't keep the public in the dark. You need to tell us. As public servants, you have to tell us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next agenda item, Jennifer Van Ansdale.
Thank you, Jennifer Gillen Van Asdale, Cranberry Township and the City of Butler. I'm an attorney, as you all likely know, and I represent 4 residents in Butler County, 4, I won't say Republicans in Butler County, 4 people who want to reopen business, but 4 people who are very concerned, as I am, that this is a political puppet show. There is no carve-out for COVID to follow the law, and in my opinion, it appears that you have broken the law. And on behalf of my clients, and as well as Attorney Steve Townsend from Pittsburgh, we referred this matter to the Butler County District Attorney and to the Pennsylvania Attorney General's office for the actions that 2 of you have abused your office and the other people that have been involved for what we believe, in our opinion, to be conflict of interest, theft of services, misapplication of government resources, conspiracy, abuse of office, and ethics. You involved politically charged, hand-picked candidates. You used your own political agenda to advance certain candidates in a state, county lawsuit. And not only is it shameful, I respectfully request that it is illegal. Moreover, it is wasteful, and it is late. The business is already in the process of being open. The Danny DeVito suit, which is a private suit by a candidate with other businesses paid privately, not with taxpayer dollars, taxpayer resources, or agendas of politically motivated commissioners, was already decided by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and by the United States Supreme Court. It dismissed the stay. You have requested in your lawsuit injunctive relief. Injunctive relief is equivalent to the stay that was dismissed. You did this late, and you did it for political reasons, and on behalf of my clients and myself, I am respectfully requesting that you take action now to stop what you've already done, and hopefully that will play for you in the future when this matter is fully reviewed by authorities of law and authorities in civil court. Thank you.
Mr. Robert Steiner.
I'm gonna have a hard time following that. Well, anyhow, I'm Bob Steitner. I live in Clearfield Township. I own businesses in Clearfield Township and Summit Township. And I was just also concerned with the lawsuit. It's pretty much the same as Cindy. I don't know where that money's gonna come from, if it's gonna come out of us. You know, eventually we're all gonna have to pay for this. You know what I mean? And we're struggling as it is now because we're losing thousands and thousands a month already. I mean, if the lawsuit, if you guys can show the lawsuit's actually doing something to help, I mean, if you think it's going to go through, but usually these things take a long time, they suck up a lot of money, and they get stuck in the court system. We all know that. So, I mean, that's pretty much all I was here to say. Just whatever we can do to get the businesses open would definitely help, because all my friends have small businesses around Butler County and everything, and we're all getting really concerned about trying to get them open to move to Stage Yellow. We called the governor's office this week, and I guess they are changing Stage Yellow, but they won't announce it till Friday. I've called them 2 or 3 times now. They claim they take your message and move it on, but I don't know what they do. So, but I'm just concerned about the money. I mean, if it's gonna cost us for a while, then is it even worth it, the lawsuit? But if you can prove that it will do something to help us, then the business owners, I feel sure, will be good with it. So, alrighty, thank you for your time.
Commissioners, we have 5 individuals who've signed in but have not checked whether they wish to speak on an agenda item. First, I'm going to ask Ms. Shaw, do you wish to speak on an agenda item?
No, these people are just signed in because they're here.
Okay.
They have to sign. It's just here.
Malloy, Mr. Critchlow?
No, I'm just one of the 4 with John Trey.
Okay. And Field and Briggs are here. Okay. All right. That's all we have on the agenda items.
Thank you. We call for the approval of minutes of April 29th, 2020 public meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries. Have any proclamations or presentations this morning?
Yes, Ms. Chairman, just to announce the National Boat Week is next week, May 16th through the 22nd, 2020. The proclamation went to them in the mail.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Under old business, we have one announcement.
Announcing that the Board of Commissioners met in executive session on Thursday, May 6th, for purposes of discussion, litigation being the topic matter. No action being taken that was not otherwise ratified and is listed today under H2 and H3 for ratification.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, under Board of Elections, the approval to relocate the following polling precincts for the June 2nd, 2020 primary election. Commissioners, this will be in the newspaper as well. We're going to take it out an ad listing all the precincts and the changes in these ones. And they do put notices on the doors for the other ones. So the first one is Center Township 2 from St. Andrew's Catholic Church to First United Methodist Church. The second one is Evans City Borough, Butler County Housing Authority, from there to the Evans City Fire Hall. The third one is Valencia Borough, from Valencia Presbyterian Church to Valencia United Methodist Church Community Hall. The fourth is Zillionople Borough 1, Butler County Housing Authority to Masonic Temple Harmony Lodge 429. The next one is Butler City 2, Butler County Housing Authority to the First United Methodist Church, Locust Street near rear entrance. And the sixth one is Butler City 5, First Baptist Church Youth Center to the Salvation Army Gymnasium Race Street entrance. I ask your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you.
Commissioners, I also want to tell you that all the voters in those precincts have been notified by mail as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, under Emergency Services, the approval of a maintenance agreement with Interaction Insight GLR for 911 center recorder maintenance in the amount of $12,810. Term of the agreement is January 1st of 2020 through December 31st of 2021. I ask your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries.
Next, approval of a quote from Biddle Consulting Group to conduct online 911 operator pre-testing in the amount of $3,495 annually. I ask your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further?
I just want to make note that these two items, 1 and 2, are both drawn from 911 funds,
Thank you.
for the record.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
And lastly, under Emergency Services, the approval to submit a grant to PEMA for COVID-19 expenses, including with approval, would be the submission of the following paperwork: the PEMA DAP 1 designation of agent resolution, PEMA DAP 2, the Public Assistant Grant Program Agreement, and PEMA PEPP1, Pennsylvania Electronic Payment Program Enrollment Form. I ask your approval.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries.
Next, under Human Services Area Agency on Aging, the approval of a parking lease agreement with the County Historical Society for 1 parking space in the amount of $50 per month. Term of the agreement is May 1st, 2020 through December 31st of 2020. I ask your approval.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further?
No county funds being used.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
Next, under Parks and Recreation, the approval to enter into an administrative agreement with Marion Township for the DCNR grant in the amount of $70,000, $50,000 of the DCNR and $20,000 from Marion Township for rehabilitation and further development of Marion Township Park. I ask your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
Next, under approval to enter into administrative agreement with Summit Township for the DCNR grant in the amount of $70,000, the $50,000 DCNR and the $20,000 Summit Township for replacement and redevelopment of Summit Elementary playground equipment and to create a community park. I ask your approval.
Have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
And last, under Parks and Recs, the approval to enter into an administrative agreement with Harrisville Borough for the DCNR grant in the amount of $175,210, $86,800 from the DCNR and $88,410 from Harrisville Borough for development project of Harrisville Community Park. I ask your approval.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Under Planning of the Bridges, approval of a right-of-way settlement agreement for the Brickyard Hill Bridge. The settlement is for Scheffler property in the amount of $7,699 with authorization for the chairman to sign. I ask your approval.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Under Planning, this CDBG, approval of a cooperation agreement with Marion Township for the application of a competitive community development block grant. This grant application will assist with the new public sewer system in the Boyers area. I ask your approval.
So
A
moved.
motion?
Second.
Anything further?
I just want to thank, on behalf of the board, want to thank Wendy Leslie for her assistance with this process in helping Marion Township. This started out as a process that came through our county's infrastructure bank program, and we were able to, based on the amount of housing and the previous estimates that they had from various engineers, which were totally out of sight, we were able to bring in consultants to help them customize a sewer plan that is more economically feasible for Marion Township. And so I'm just very proud of her work and her assistance with this process and seeing this to some fruition.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
Second, under CDBG, the approval to do an RFP for environmental review consulting services for the CDBG program. I ask your approval.
We have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you.
Commissioners, we have two add-ons for the CDBG. The change order for Slippery Rock Borough Township Sidewalk Project, requesting a change order of $820.74 for three crossings of the driveway at the Slippery Rock Elementary School. These three were not on the original plan, and the contractor added these by mistake. The township has voted to pay for these because it was a good addition to the sidewalk at the elementary school, even though they were not required to be on the driveway for PennDOT. After much discussion at the township, they liked the idea of these being added and voted to pay the difference of $820.74 for all three. The Slippery Rock Township CDBG funding and Miss Leslie will revise the funding for the 2017 project to cover the cost. I ask your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? It's a good one for the library. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries. Thank you.
And one more is the revision of the Slippery Rock Township 2017 funds to cover the $820.74, and I ask your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries.
Next, under Pathonetary, Ms. Ferrari, did you want to present? Or Mr.
She's right there.
No.
Mr. White can do it for you if you like.
Commissioners, the Pathonetary is asking that you approve a proposal which she's received from an entity known as GovPayNet. It's a service agreement. It would allow her office to consider the acceptance of credit debit card payments for services and filings within her office. You may recall that GovPayNet is the same service and that the Butler County Sheriff's Office is currently using. I think they just started using it maybe within the last 3-4 months. I have reviewed the service agreement. I find it acceptable. I would point out that there's no cost to the county in that it's essentially a system whereby if somebody wishes to use a credit card for filing purposes, they'd be notified that there's a fee associated with that that's then assessed to the filer. It's a minimum fee of $1 or a percentage of the transaction. I believe the percentage is 2%, 2.1% of the transaction. I'd also point out that the county, i.e. the proprietary, it's a one-year agreement, renewing in one-year agreements, but the county can cancel the agreement on 30 days' notice.
Okay. You have a motion?
So moved.
Sorry.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor?
Just a
Oh, sorry.
statement. No, it's okay. Just a statement that you did say this is vetted by Jim, right? At the
Yes,
IT.
when the proprietary approached me about it, the first person that was discussed with was IT.
Okay, perfect. That's good. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That motion carries.
Commissioners, under Sheriff, the approval of a proposal from Bearcom in the amount of $19,205.95 with authorization for the chairman to sign, and this project will enhance the sheriff mobile radio communications in the building where there has been identified as lacking signal strength and cellular service issues. Pricing is through the CoStar's contract. I ask your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further?
I think we're expecting that with the new radio systems as well, with the
Right.
BDAs, and so we ask that a lot of municipalities put those ordinance into their code, so it's not unexpected.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no. That motion carries.
Commissioners, I'm going to add one item under Public Defender. They've added an employee as a public defenders, and therefore their Westlaw has increased per person, and they're asking for the amendment to their existing contract to add another employee. So I ask your approval.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. That motion carries.
And under Commissioners, the approval of an interim replacement agreement with specialized staffing for the Department of Elections with authorization for the chair to sign. I ask your approval.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Commissioners, under item H2, as previously announced at the commencement of the meeting, executive session of the Board of Commissioners was conducted on Thursday, May 7th. At that time, a matter of litigation was discussed, and at that time, there was decision by the Board of Commissioners to move forward with the participation in civil action against the governor and the Secretary of Health. At this time, I ask that you ratify that decision in a public meeting by taking a vote in regards to that decision.
So we'll begin with the motion.
So moved.
I'll second it. Okay. Any discussion?
Just, I think it's pointed out today by the public, at least that was here, and we've heard from both sides the whole way through this process of looking at this legal suit. The initial, at least my initial concept of the lawsuit was to move the state and Department of Health to open up lines of communication, give us better clarity, as I believe one of the employers had mentioned earlier. And it was a struggle, and I don't want to make excuses for the governor nor the state. I think that it was definitely a flaw in communication. I also think that they're trying to build a plane in midair during this virus, and to keep the virus as the enemy and not the person. And I think that making it a personal issue, we have to avoid doing that. I would also make a statement that while we were pushing for this lawsuit, and we did get the attention through letters and other means, some good things were coming out of that as far as communication that I think Ms. Lalonde spoke of. And so we did set that up. It went awry. We came back. The other day we had over an hour conversation that County Commissioners Association set up with Secretary Gormaz, and Governor Wolf was on the call, and so was Dr. Levine for nearly over an hour. And there was some progress made there. Not perfect, but it's in the right direction. I thoroughly look forward to additional communications like that. I know my fellow commissioners would agree that that's one of the steps that we were looking for. Where we tend to differ is the direction of the lawsuit. My personal opinion of this lawsuit is that we're looking for, basically the lawsuit says that we have harm. I can't tell you that the county has a direct harm, other than our businesses, and there will be future harm. I believe that to be true, and listen, I'll fight for all those businesses. I'd rather work at getting them stood up in a different way, whether it be through the IDA grants, Growth Collaborative, whatever we have available at our local resource, and making sure we understand the state and federal resources so we can provide good information. I think it's going to be critical, and I don't think anyone's going to disagree on that. But I don't believe that the county has a dog in this fight as far as our own personal. I do believe that a business could probably bring that case on, and perhaps should. I do believe that there may be a better entity or a different direction to do that. Could be Chamber of Commerce, could be tourism, could be somebody else. And not that I want to avoid that, but I do believe that, as we heard today, there may be additional litigation based on the fact that maybe this isn't ours. I don't want to say that it's an unnecessary lawsuit. I think that there may be some necessity, but not from our purview, from our standing point. So for that reason, I would be voting no.
So as elected representatives of the people that we serve, anytime we make a decision, you have a percentage of the people that are happy with that decision, and you have a percentage of people that are not happy with that decision. We have had people that have come here and communicated this morning that they're not happy with the decision to pursue and move forward with a lawsuit. However, we have heard from numerous business owners and citizens throughout the county in the past week that are supportive of the action that the county commissioners are deciding to move forward with a course of legal action. A couple weeks ago, we had a conference call with our legislators, all our local legislators. And I myself posed the question, do we as a county defy the governor, which there's 7 counties that are in the process of doing. Instead, we took the appropriate course of action, and that was to go through the legal process, abiding by the law, upholding the Constitution, upholding the oath of office that we swear to at our swearing in, that we will uphold, obey, and defend the Constitution, so help me God. So as representatives elected by the people, we are, Commissioner Oshie and myself, we are representing the citizens throughout Butler County that are supportive of this course of action. This lawsuit, let me be clear, was never about transitioning from one colored phase, whether it's red to yellow, yellow to green, yellow back to red, which is also a possibility. And let me be clear, we may be in the yellow phase for weeks, months, no one knows. But the one constant that holds true is that the fact that civil rights were violated in this process of communication, direction, order, executive order by the governor and the Secretary of Health. That's the constant. So this lawsuit is not about transitioning from one colored phase and turning yellow. That's why the argument that this is a moot point at this point in time does not hold up. This lawsuit is about defending the civil rights that were violated of our businesses and citizens throughout this county And as elected leaders that took an oath to swear to defend that Constitution and people's civil rights, that's what we're doing. And we're going through this course of action because this is the appropriate law-abiding action. We're not defying the governor like the 7 counties out east that are just opening up their county with no regard or with little regard. We're taking a specific strategic course of action in which we hope that we're able to forthcoming reform the process where if we ever find ourselves as a Commonwealth in this place and point in time again where we are faced with a health pandemic, that there's a process to be followed where we can honor and secure, mitigate the safety of everyone's health while at the same time still providing a point of living where we have business that isn't forced to close down, where we have people that have the ability to continue to go to school and be educated, and people have the ability to go out their door and go to a job. That's what this lawsuit is about. We have citizens and businesses that are facing economic hardship right now throughout our entire Commonwealth. Economic ruin. And we have businesses and citizens that are never going to economically recover from this pandemic. Whether it's financially or through the loss of loved ones, family and friends. And there's not a whole lot, we can do, but we can stand up and we can make a point through civil action and say, this is wrong, how this was communicated, the lack of transparency, the changing metrics, the changing standards. We can make those points through this process and try to create reform. Because our conversation yesterday with the governor and the Secretary of Health was amazing in the fact that going forward, they're establishing a new norm, whether we like it or not. And our lives are all going to be affected, whether we like it or not. We're not even going to have a say. And the scary part is, they believe infectious disease is going to be an ongoing continuation. So if we don't fight this now and establish new standards for how we handle these future pandemics related to infectious diseases, if we don't do something now, it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late. We're going to surrender our civil rights and our freedoms and liberties as people. And our younger generations, if we don't stand up and educate them and take a stand and say this is worth fighting, these freedoms and liberties, so that we can all live a free life, they're never going to understand the freedoms that they lose in the future. This is the course of legal action that Commissioner Oshie and I have decided to take. The easy way out would be to say no, to do nothing. But that's not what we're here for. We were elected by the people of Butler County to be their representatives and be their voice when they can't be that voice and when they feel like they're not being heard. And we heard from numerous people, hundreds of people throughout the county that said, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for standing up. Thank you for fighting against this governor. He's out of control. And if we can create that necessary reform that's needed for not just Butler County, but all counties, to prevent this from reoccurring in this manner in the future, and it doesn't matter who the governor is, if we can establish a new standard and process, then this will be worth it. The return on investment of having freedom to go on with our daily lives in the manner in which we'd like to pursue will be worth it. If we can have a different solution in addressing statewide health pandemics and the processes and the communication and what's needed without violating people's civil rights, as stated in our Constitution, then it's worth it. You know, I was reading about our founding fathers the other night, and I shared with somebody who wrote to me in disagreement yesterday. And I shared with her that our founding fathers, they put property. Property is mentioned throughout the Constitution numerous times. And you wonder why that is. But what I realized as I read on and through other books I've read about our founding fathers, the biographies of Ben Franklin and John Adams and so on, is that these people equated property with business, with building a building, with the freedom of being able to build a house or a barn. And then they equated that with independence, personal independence, and then self-sufficiency from government. And how does government, when government takes that, shuts down the business, and there's a taking with unjust compensation, there's a violation of civil rights. That's what this is about. So while I really appreciate everybody who came today at our public meeting and shared a different opinion than the opinion I'm now sharing with everybody, there is a large sector of people throughout Butler County that are supportive of standing up for the state constitution and people's rights. So if you find our board of commissioners divided, that's what this is about. We've got two people that are on one side of the coin and one on the other. And it's not easy for anybody,
Right.
but it's the right thing to do. So that's all I have to say. I appreciate everybody coming and sharing your perspective. I'm listening. I'm not ignoring you. I'm listening to what you have to say because I am a person that believes that there's something to learn from everybody we meet in life. So I appreciate your concerns and your perspectives that were shared this morning. And I want you to know that I'm going to be voting to uphold the legal course of action that we set out to do, representing the people throughout Butler County that want to stand and want preservation of our constitutional rights. Thank you.
Before I talk a little bit about process, Mr. King, would you be willing to give us a status update of this case along with the Supreme Court case?
I'd be happy to. I think I'll take my mask off then. I want to compliment Mr. Smith and Mr. Heasley for speaking with their mask on, but I think I might be full of more hot air than they are, so I'm going to speak this way. If the commissioners would indulge me a little bit, I want to give a little bit of background on what's before you today and this particular suit that was brought. I also want to, if you'll let me, share with you some language from a United States Supreme Court case. And I'd like to start out by asking, does anybody here know who Hugo Black was? How about the lawyers in the room?
I think
course
Pat
we do.
Casey.
I wouldn't have asked you if you had your hand up. So who's Hugo Black, right? So Hugo Black, in his day, if you think of Bernie Sanders, that's Hugo Black. Hugo Black was a United States Senator. Hugo Black was the ultra-liberal. Hugo Black was a Democrat. Hugo Black was a Justice of the United States Supreme Court. And what I want to tell you today is that this is not about Republicans and Democrats. It is not. I have as much faith in Mr. Boozle's position. I'm here to, I would be the first, among the first to stand up and to respect Mr. Boozle's position as I would be to respect Mrs. Guy or Mrs. Oshie's position. I would be among the first to defend Republican or Democrat. I've represented lots of Democrats and lots of Republicans in life. And in the law, that makes absolutely no difference. I also want to say, with respect to Mr. Heasley and Mr. Smith, that we'd love to have them join in this lawsuit. And I invite them publicly today to consider, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but we would ask you to consider that. We would love to have you participate in this suit as part of this action. So I want to go back to, if you give me a few minutes and indulge me a little bit, I found this as part of what we've been doing so important that I brought it with me today. I wanted to read to you from Justice Hugo Black's decision in a case that occurred during World War II. And it's called Kahanamoku Sheriff versus Steer. And it's also called Duncan versus Kahanamoku. Kahanamoku was the sheriff of Honolulu, Hawaii, in the territory of Hawaii before Hawaii was a state, back in World War II. And I thought that this will take a little bit of time, but I hope you find it interesting. So Justice Black went through this entire action. The government set up military tribunals in the territory of Hawaii before Hawaii was a state. And the government ceded to those tribunals the right to make decisions about people's lives. And this case got to the United States Supreme Court, and Mr. Justice Black, the famous Hugo Black, wrote this opinion. And it's really important because it gives you some historical perspective on, I think, what is at the root of this action that's being taken today. And here's what Mr. Justice Black had to say. As early as the 17th century, our British ancestors took political action against aggressive military rule. When James I and Charles I authorized martial law for purposes of speedily punishing all types of crimes committed by civilians, the protest led to the historic Petition of Right, which in uncompromising terms objected to this arbitrary procedure and prayed that it be stopped and never repeated. When later the American colonies declared their independence, one of the grievances listed by Jefferson, my hero, Thomas Jefferson, I went to the University of Virginia. Jefferson, of course, was the founder of the Democratic Party, but of which I'm not a member, but he's my hero. So when later the American colonies declared their independence, one of the grievances listed by Jefferson was that the king had endeavored to render the military superior to the civil power. The executive and military officials, who later found it necessary to utilize the armed forces to keep order in a young and turbulent nation, did not lose sight of the philosophy embodied in the Petition of Right and the Declaration of Independence, that existing civilian government, and especially the courts, were not to be interfered with by the exercise of military power. In 1787, the year in which the Constitution was formulated, the governor of Massachusetts colony used this militia to cope with Shays' rebellion. In his instructions to the commander of the troops, the governor listed the great objects of the mission. The troops were to protect the judicial courts, to assist the civil magistrates in executing the laws, to aid them in apprehending the disturbers of the public peace. The commander was to consider himself constantly as under the direction of the civil officer, saving where any armed force should appear and oppose his, marching to execute these orders. President Washington's instructions to the commander of the troops sent into Pennsylvania to suppress the Whiskey Rebellion of 1794 were to the same effect. The troops were to see to it, and this should come home because we are the home here of the Whiskey Rebellion. The troops were sent to see that the laws were enforced and were to deliver the leaders of the armed insurgents to the regular courts for trial. The President admonished the commanding general that the judge cannot be controlled in his functions. In the many instances of the use of troops to control the activities of civilians that followed, the troops were generally again employed merely to aid and not to supplant civilian authorities. The last noteworthy incident before the enactment of the Organic Act was the rioting that occurred in the summer of 1892 at the Coeur d'Alene mines of Shoshone County, Idaho. The President ordered the regular troops to report to the governor for instructions and to support the civil authorities in preserving the peace. Later, the state auditor, as agent of the governor and not the commanding general, ordered the troops to detain citizens without trial and to aid the auditor in doing all that he thought necessary to stop the riot. Once more, the military authorities did not undertake to supplant the courts and to establish military tribunals to try and punish ordinary civilian offenders. And this is Mr. Justice Black saying, courts and their procedural safeguards are indispensable to our system of government. They were set up by our founders to protect the liberties they valued. Our system of government clearly is the antithesis of military rule, and the founders of this country are not likely to have contemplated complete military dominance within the limits of a territory made part of this country and not recently taken from an enemy. They were opposed to governments that placed in the hands of one man the power to make, interpret, and enforce the laws. Their philosophy has been the people's throughout our history. For that reason, we have maintained legislatures chosen by citizens or their representatives and courts and juries to try those who violate legislative enactments. We have always been especially concerned about the potential evils of summary criminal trials and have guarded against them by provisions embodied in the Constitution itself. That is precisely what this lawsuit that you may authorize today and have authorized so far, that is precisely what this is about. So the status of the lawsuit is that a lawsuit has been filed in the United States District Court on behalf of 4 counties in western Pennsylvania: Butler, Washington, Greene, and Fayette. Their commissioners have joined, and Commissioner Boozle, Commissioner Oshie, Commissioner Geyer were all on a very large phone conversation with other commissioners from those counties, and we heard from the various commissioners throughout that call, and I was able to explain what the constitutional infirmities of various actions taken in Pennsylvania were. And so we had a participation of all the commissioners in listening to that discussion and participating in it. During the course of that discussion, I described to the commissioners and to all of you what I thought were potential violations of the United States Constitution. For example, Article 1, Article 5, and Article 14. Those particular articles of the United States Constitution prohibit the taking, for example, of people's businesses, as Commissioner Geyer was speaking to today. The 14th Amendment talks to things like procedural due process. So our lawsuit that we've put together on behalf of the people who represent the counties that I've mentioned earlier, as well as various business owners. Those business owners, I have no idea whether they're Republican or Democrat. I don't know what their political parties are or their preferences are. I do know that the legislators who've agreed to join were participants in calls, I think, earlier, before I ever got involved in this, earlier with the commissioners and with FEMA and PEMA and those organizations. And they were good enough to join as well. They're joining as citizens, as are the other citizens who have joined us to support this particular action. What the action addresses is the situation as it currently, as you all know, it currently exists in Pennsylvania. So, for example, we have disparate treatment as between counties, and that's one of the allegations of the complaint. The disparate treatments are that, for example, Commissioner Boozle lives up in the northern end of the county, and Commissioner Geyer lives in the southern end of the county. There are significant differences with respect to the geography and the density of the population and those sorts of things, county lines make absolutely no sense with respect to this color-coded organization that's been set out with red, green, and yellow in the middle. The virus does not respect boundaries. And by the way, I want to add this parenthetically. There's nobody in this room, including me or any of the commissioners, any of the 3 commissioners, or anybody in this room. Look, you can look around the room and see people with their masks on, people that are almost social distancing, maybe a little close today, but there's nobody here that diminishes this virus or the effects. One of the gentlemen who spoke today, I thought he made me think about people that I know who I actually know people who have contracted the virus, as maybe a lot of you do, and there have been people lost in this county, albeit, and thankfully, thank God for that they're not in the numbers that were projected earlier. However, so you have this disparity as between counties, and that's one of the things we've raised. So the county of Butler, for example, borders the counties of Mercer and Clarion and Venango to the north. So you have those counties put in a different color-coded section than Butler counties. What recourse does Butler County have with respect to that? None. Under the current situation, the governor has taken it upon himself and the Secretary of Health to unilaterally, arbitrarily, and without there are no guidelines. This Board of Commissioners, you operate under the county code. You have lots of rules and regulations. You always have standards that you have to meet. There are no standards. There is nothing set by our legislature. There is nothing that authorized the setup of this color-coded business that's taken place. And the discrimination in and of itself in between how it affects various counties is very telling. Also, as everybody in this room knows, the second thing that they did was create this life-sustaining business list. And so that list has been a moving target. That list wasn't created by 3 people like yourselves who were elected to make these kind of decisions. It wasn't created by the legislature. It was created by the governor and or the Secretary of Health. And the reason I say that is it's not clear who exactly it is who created these lists. It's also not clear who exactly it was who granted these waivers from those things. So we have people in Butler County. We all know people. There's probably people in this room, people who applied for waivers and were denied.
Those are done by DCED.
Well, they deny that. So in the Supreme Court case, in the Danny DeVito case in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, it's not clear who did that. And so the Supreme Court ultimately said these things are not appealable because they're not done by DCED, they're done by the governor, and therefore they're not appealable. So that's not an action taken by a state administrative agency, so you can't appeal it. And by the way, I want to clarify one thing, and I think Ms. Van Asdale got it almost right. She said the stay order was denied in the Supreme Court, and that is what was denied, the stay order. The appeal itself is still there in the United States Supreme Court. So only the stay was denied, and what was asked for was a stay or a stoppage of the governor's order prior to an appeal being heard. It's a highly unusual thing to be granted, and it wasn't granted in this case, but it's not the end of, and the Supreme Court has not ruled on that particular appeal at this particular time. So, in addition to these, and just to digress a little bit, back to these.
I'd like to make the arguments like, can we get moving? I just need to know where you're at. I mean, I feel like we're making an argument in court. I just need to hear it.
I feel like I should get a chance to respond since you mentioned me too.
Well, I mentioned you favorably.
Yeah.
So,
But you only mentioned
but I'm speaking right now, so you can talk all you want.
King.
So,
Mr. King, just a moment, please. Don't, okay? One, we're taking minutes. 2, it's a public meeting. We're going to have public decorum and proper decorum. And you both, as members of the bar, respected members of the bar, know better, okay? Please don't engage in that kind of discourse. Address the commissioners, deal with the commissioners, and when it's your time to talk, you may talk. Thank you, Mr. King. Please proceed.
Thank you. I will try to.
Thank you.
Try to speed up a little bit. So we have this situation in Harrisburg where these decisions have been made that greatly affect our citizens. They affect the civil rights of all of our citizens. And so the decision of whether someone's business is life-sustaining or not life-sustaining is a decision being made in a room somewhere, and it may be DCED where the decisions were being made, but that's been denied. So the question becomes, who made those decisions? So if, for example, Commissioner Boozle had a business and he wanted a waiver, he would apply for that waiver. He had no right to appear at a hearing. He had no right to be represented by a lawyer. He had no right to a transcript being made of that proceeding. And he had no right to appeal that decision. He didn't even know who made that decision. But that decision affected his fundamental rights to exist in his business and to support his employees. Those are constitutionally protected rights. So this particular suit covers all of those sorts of things that we contend, not Republican, not Democrat. They are American issues. They're American constitutional issues that are protected by the United States Constitution. And to answer your question, roundaboutly, I appreciate your indulgence, but to answer your question, Commissioner Osteen, so this lawsuit has been filed in the United States District Court. Judge William Stickman, who is a federal judge in Pittsburgh, has been assigned to hear the case. We are in the process of trying to determine, we've talked to the Attorney General's office, and they've told us that they're in the process of determining whether they're going to defend the governor and the Secretary of Health. I firmly believe they will, but there's a process they have to go through. So in order to effectuate service of the summons that are issued in federal court, we have to serve them either personally on the governor and the Secretary of Health, or we can deliver them to the Attorney General once they tell us they're representing them. I hope that comes quickly. We are in the process of preparing under Rule 57 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure that govern all federal courts. We're in the process of preparing under Rule 57 a request for a speedy hearing before Judge Stickman on the declaratory judgment that we filed. So the action we filed doesn't seek money for anybody. It doesn't seek anything for anybody other than a declaration of the constitutional rights that we believe have been trampled by the current governor and health secretary. And so we're not asking that anything happen to them other than a declaration be made that you can't operate that way. So if you're going to have a waiver system, have a hearing, have due process, give people the right to be heard, and explain to people why it is that, for example, in our lawsuit, one of the parties in our lawsuit is McDonald's Furniture Company. McDonald's Furniture Company sells furniture. So does Walmart. So does Target. So do people that were allowed to be open simply because they sold something else in that store. So McDonald's stood by and watched his customers go to Target or go to Walmart or go to the box stores to buy furniture and not buy from him. Likewise, one of the parties in this lawsuit is a drive-in theater. Two of the parties are drive-in theaters. One of them in one of the other counties, I believe in Greene County, is across the street, located across the street from a Dairy Queen and a pizza parlor. Those two businesses were allowed to be open, and the drive-in theater was not. We have a drive-in theater in Butler County that's part of this, and I know they've talked to some of the commissioners, and I know they've talked to Commissioner Boozle, and they speak highly of your involvement in trying to help them. They were denied a waiver for the purpose of holding a religious service at Easter time. They wanted to have an Easter service, people in their cars, and they went to the effort to put in touchless sinks, touchless faucets, to train all their employees to bring in all the masks and the gloves and the hand sanitizers and everything else, and they were denied. On the other hand, they were told that they could conduct a local high school's graduation there, but not a religious service. They were also told that they weren't allowed to be open to show movies. So you tell me if that isn't discriminatory, I don't know what is. So I'm proud to be here today to tell you that we have that lawsuit filed. That lawsuit will go forward. Judge Stickman will hear it. We're not sure when, but we're going to try to get him to hear it as soon as possible. We'd like these issues to be resolved. We're certainly amenable to working out anything with the governor's office or the Attorney General's office with respect to correcting these constitutional deficiencies, to reforming them, to creating a system that's actually legally correct, and so we're prepared to do that. At the same time, we are filing in the Danny DeVito case, which is still pending before the United States Supreme Court, an amicus brief, because many of those issues are, not all, but many of those issues are covered in our lawsuit as well. And so we are in support of that case being heard, and that's what an amicus brief would be filed on behalf of them, saying that we're in favor of them being heard in the United States Supreme Court. So that's where we are today, and with your action today, we will proceed further. We hope to have the amicus action filed, hopefully filed by the end of the week. It could be as late as the early next week. And certainly with respect to the United States District Court in Pittsburgh, we intend to file within the next day or so this action, asking the court to hear this on a speedy basis, which is which we are entitled to have under Rule 57 of the Rules of Federal Procedure. So thank you very much. That's a summary, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just
Yes,
one
sir.
quick question. Of the 4 counties,
Yes.
do you know what the votes were? I believe they were all 2-1.
I don't know that for sure. I do know,
That's the case.
I did hear from one of the counties that it was 2-1 from Washington.
Yeah,
But
that was the only one I wasn't sure of.
I
So they
wasn't
all-
aware of the other
They
counties.
are all 2-1.
Thank you. Any other questions? I'd be glad to answer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I would just like to speak to process more than anything, as well as intent. First of all, when this crisis and pandemic began, it was declared a public health emergency, and at the same time, a disaster declaration was issued by the governor. Now, what I'm going to say is that those two things are somewhat incongruent. Most disasters, and I believe that the intention of the acts that give him the power to do that, I don't believe the intention of a disaster declaration was ever about public health emergencies. It was about disasters. And the way that act is set up, it defines what the governor can and cannot do under those acts. And that particular act is also in which under that declaration where he issued those business closures based on that act. There are also, there's also all of the various statutes related to the Department of Public Health and what their actions are. Many of you may well know that many years ago there was changes in the 1950s regarding whether or not counties would continue to have their own public health departments. At the time, it was apparently deemed to be somewhat another level of bureaucracy, and so this county, like many others, did away with their local health department. And what that means is that for our counties who do not have a local health department, we basically cede the operations of public health to the state Department of Public Health. So we have a challenge here in trying to administer something, because typically under a disaster declaration, the disaster happens oftentimes at the local level, and locally you manage a disaster. In my mind, with all of that has happened here, we have really been denied in so many ways our role, and as Commissioner Geyer alluded to, what we swore to when we took the oath, we have been denied our ability to represent our community and represent our residents of our county through this entire process. So I just want to take a moment to review a little bit of a timeline, because I think in defense, we stood together through this process, all three of us. On April 14th of 2020, I and Commissioner Boozle joined a county commissioner's call that was related to an amendment to legislation that was being introduced by the Senate, Senate Bill 327, that would have left the reopening decisions to county commissioners based on specific criteria, but reopening on a county-by-county basis. at that time, there was already discussion about opening on a more regional approach. And there was an extensive discussion by the board of CCAP on that call about whether or not it made sense to try to do that county by county, because as Mr. King just alluded to the fact, the virus doesn't know borders. So that would have made it extremely difficult, I think, to try to make those decisions on a county by county basis, because as we all well know, one county opens up, the other one doesn't, and everyone rushes to those other counties, and that was not something that anyone really truly wanted to see happen, nor as they traveled, as many of our folks travel in and out of counties, they 50% commute in, 50% commute out for work. So there are challenges related to that. So our chairman, and let it be noted that, Commissioner Vusel is the vice chairman. I am the treasurer of that organization. So the president of of our association did testify in that Senate hearing and talked about the fact that, it really needed to begin to follow that regional approach, which was part of her testimony that said, we needed to be able to discuss this by region. So on the 17th of April, as you might well know, Butler County residents began public protests in front of the government center, demanding that the county reopen. There were multiple protests. There were angered people. There was action being taken where businesses said they were going to open and defy the order. I will never tell somebody to obey the law, not only because it's the law to not open, right? I would never tell somebody to open. Sorry, thank you.
Thought we were going to need you again as a lawyer.
I will never tell somebody to disobey the law. Thank you. Let's get my double negative in there, right? I will never tell somebody to disobey the law. And at the time, the fact was he had ordered us closed. And so by opening, you would be disobeying the law. Thank you for clarification. I'm a little heated. And I have to also say that, again, as I've listened, and for biblical reasons where that says, quite frankly, you don't disobey authority. I had two pretty solid arguments for not doing that. So on the 24th of April, the governor announced the phased reopening of PA that would have been done by regions. And again, Butler was included in the Southwest region. And that same day, I did an interview on Channel 11 indicating that we stood ready to work with Allegheny County and Rich Fitzgerald and the rest of the region to safely open Southwest Pennsylvania. I followed that up with an email asking him to copy to the commissioners, asking him to take a lead in convening those commissioners in the region. I didn't get a response to that. However, on April 27th, during a virtual meeting with the Southwest PA Commission, he did ask the commission to collect data on the county and the region based on the measure the state staff did, or that based on the measure that was announced that was 50 new cases per 100,000 population over the rolling 14-day period. The Southwest PA Commission staff did that for all 9 counties in the region, and they have continued to do that throughout this process every 2 weeks. We more than met the measurement to move to the yellow zone. I believe that same day, Commissioner Garambuzo also had a call with Ellie Doyle, the governor's office, to share concerns related to the opening of the plan. And I wasn't in that meeting because I was in the commission meeting at the time. Again, I think sharing a number of concerns. And so on April 29th, the commissioners at our meeting voted unanimously to pass a resolution to send a letter to Governor Wolf clearly outlining the work that our county had done. And I have a copy of the letter here along with the resolution, asking them to consider moving us again to the yellow zone. On Friday, May 1st, the commissioners did an interview with WISR, thanks to the support of the radio station here as well, about our work and our plans and the frustration with the lack of communication with the governor's office and the Department of Health. And we all shared our frustration with the lack of transparency, the communication, and the engagement. On May 1st, we joined the Northwest County, the same day, County Commissioners Association, chaired by Commissioner Pat Fabian in Armstrong County, in writing a letter to the governor, respectfully requesting our counties be moved to yellow. On the afternoon of May 1st, we learned that we would not move to the yellow phase. Again, we were flooded with calls and emails and protests. And while a few people were obviously lashing out, most were small business owners who were concerned about their loss of investment, their livelihoods, and their ruin, truly. On May 2nd, early that morning, after no sleep, I discovered an email that had a risk assessment tool in it that was dated May 1st, late in the day, that we had not ever seen, that outlined the index factors used to determine how counties would move from one phase to another. So we received that tool after they had already made the decision, and then in that tool, there were 4 additional indexes, not the one measure that we were told we were measured up against. There were 4 more indexes, and that particular PowerPoint also added, and this came from the Department of Health, added that in order to get to green, we would have to have contact tracing in place and the ability to do that contact tracing. And it started to outline how that contact tracing would be done. Once again, that particular morning, I sent another email to the governor's office, Southwest representative, along with Lisa Schaefer, who is again our CCAP representative, and again said, really, this doesn't have to be this difficult. We could hold, if they would just engage with the regions and discussion about how we might collaboratively work together to get this done. We asked again. On the same day was the day that the commissioners held the virtual call with our elected legislators and senators, who suggested that Butler lead a regional effort to stand up for our business community and residents who deserved better support in order to be safe and to have a safe reopening. Because again, I would not want to see businesses reopen against the law. On that call, the legal action was also suggested in order to address the challenges that we had. And so on Monday, May 4th, we hosted that virtual call with all of the counties in the region, with the exception of Allegheny County. And my reason for not including him, Mr. Fitzgerald, was because I didn't think it was fair to him as a Democrat leader to ask him to go against his governor, because he was the one who had a good relationship with the governor that I pointed out in the email that I sent to him. And he could have been the one who could have taken that lead because he had the ear of the governor. And so in that call, Mr. King joined the call and explained the legalities of what we might pursue in terms of legal action. And again, there were 2 actions that could be taken. One was a letter and a press release and a very vocal stance, that indicated our displeasure, and along with some other things that we'd like to see happen. And then the other would be legal action, and the counties were to go back and make decisions about whether or not they were going to join that effort. Either way, one, the other, or both. However, following that call, the Democrat commissioners did have their own call, which they have a right to do. And then subsequently, we were invited to a call for questions and answers only with Butler County commissioners. Now, while I appreciate that, all along it was said the governor set it up as regions. CCAP said we didn't want individual counties. And so again, That wasn't, I didn't perceive that to be the way to proceed. We needed to proceed as a regional call. And when I sent the email back and invited the others to join the call, they canceled the call.
He didn't include the secretary, though, in that.
What didn't include the secretary?
Your blast out to all the other commissioners in other counties, he was not, you know, I didn't want him to be waylaid by 40 people on a phone call. I was expecting 3.
Okay. Subsequently, 4 counties, in addition to the sitting elected officials and many businesses that our counties represented, voted to go forward with that legal action since we had no relief to those requests. And it was a sad day when we have to take that step forward. So yes, we're here to protect the constitutional rights of the citizens. But I think we made every attempt to be good partners with the state. Every attempt to be good partners with the governor. But at this point, I'd rather take the rightful legal action in the court of law versus have our community, and as now you see, these commissioners who have said they're just going to open their counties and defy the governor's order, they're now being punished. And our businesses are confused. And they're confused because one moment a salon is yellow, can open in the yellow zone. The next minute they can't. Hours later we get an email back, they can't. They have no, there's no real guidance. It's been up and down. And, you know,
We didn't want to jeopardize their state licenses.
no, and that's the next issue. So then the governor has now said, you know, they will take those sorts of actions against those counties. They will withhold the CARES funding. They will take action against those businesses who could lose their license. And that is absolutely true. Their licenses could be pulled. And so they're confused about which approach they should take. Some of them said, I'm just going to open, and others don't know because they don't want to lose their license. And despite the fact, and you know, to the DA's credit, he stood up and said, we won't prosecute. But by the same token, he can't defend them against somebody taking away their license to operate or their occupancy permit, or now the governor has said he will engage the insurance department to address issues and potentially affect people's insurance. And so these mandates and orders, they're mandates. There is guidance from the CDC. The CDC is guidance. There's a big difference between guidance and mandates. And so I thought it was important that everybody understand the process of why we came here and how we got to this point. And I respect everyone's opinions, as does Commissioner Guyer and Commissioner Boozle. And, you know, we knew that this could potentially go sideways. We had that discussion. Mm-hmm. And here we are. And we're prepared to take that vote to move forward on behalf of our citizens. And I will say something also about the suit. Those legislative officials who signed their name onto that suit were on those calls, or took part in those calls, or joined because they were made aware of it. Were made aware of the call. And the only person who wasn't would have been the congressman. He was the only person that would not have been on either the call with the legislators or the call with the legislators and commissioners. But he is our only congressman in this particular situation. So I believe they signed on with the intent to support the business community. But in order to be included in the suit, they had to have a legal standing to be in there. And so that was what was defined in there as their legal standing. But they signed on to support the businesses. Now, whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent right now is the least of my concerns. The fact that we're standing up as a county to represent them is what I have to vote for, to represent the business community in particular and our citizens and the future freedoms that Commissioner Guyer so well spoke about. is my reason for voting yes.
I didn't know we were going to full argument. I thought we were just giving our opinion about the lawsuit, but there's a couple of things that were left out in this. Like in the process, I was following your timeline, which is very accurate. Thank you. One of the things that concerned me about this process for us, for the three of us that we do have control over, is how we got to the filing of the lawsuit. I know you worked with Solicitor White and getting that, but there was an actual paper that said vote, and they signed off. But when we come down to it, we didn't have a meeting. We didn't have a public meeting. We didn't have that. That was of concern. The process, it's okay for other people to be held accountable to a process, but our process was flawed. At the very end, I got an email at 1:26 in the afternoon and said, hey, we're filing at 2 o'clock. That was a real problem. I mean, you know there's a problem. I mean, that's nothing to hide. But that process didn't work. And so we come into that process and we start having a conversation in the executive session about how much will it cost? Don't know. Who's going to pay? Don't know. You know, what exactly is being filed? It was handed to me at that point from a printout. And that's the first time I saw the final copy that was going in. Amicus brief still not filed, but you're saying you're filing. We've never decided on that. Like, that's another problem for me. Like, we're looking at this as everyone else has to be held to these accountabilities, and if we put the governor in a situation, or the president for that matter, if you put him in a situation, look, as an emergency responder, you respond on what's happening in front of you that moment. You can start to broaden that purview out as time, when you get time. But see, in a disaster, you don't have time. You have a limited amount of data and a limited amount of time, and you have to react. I don't think anyone in this room said, Tom Wolf, you did a horrible job by shutting us down because we didn't know anything about it. I don't think anyone said that. I do say, and I would agree, that there's been this lull of information which we've been working on. It's not perfect. I would say the same with the president, that he's not reciprocated a lot of information back and forth to the governors or vice versa. So, you know, if we're gonna start suing our leaders, our elected leaders, and we better start suing them all, because I think that that's part of this process. Is, look, we have a legal obligation, yes, we do, to follow the guidelines. I agree with that the Department of Health and a public health emergency doesn't specifically say that it's going to fall under the disaster, but the president declared a disaster. The governor of all 50 states declared a disaster. Our counties declared a disaster across the Pennsylvania, and almost half of our municipalities declared a disaster. So that tells me that somebody better take control of this situation, because we're all in disaster. If we pinpoint a single leader, a political leader, into a corner where they can't respond, imagine if we couldn't close. Imagine what would have happened, right? That's my fear. And I think that in the process, I don't want the court of law telling what the people, if they have the time, we elect people. The elected people then set policy. They vote on it. That's our vote. That's your voice. We are now saying, scrub all that. We're going to go to court, and we're going to let one person or one body make the decision. That's a concern. If this were, and I know people don't believe it was a political thing. We knew it was going to turn political. It did turn political. We acknowledge that, you know, for the fact that Rich probably couldn't be on that call. And, you know, you look at the divide into 4 of the 11 counties that did join this lawsuit, 4 of 11, and they were all 2-to-1 votes. There's a reason you have a system of government that you have, right? We know this lawsuit's going to go forward. I know it today. There's no doubt in my mind it's going forward, not because of my vote, but because there's 2 other people that say they want this vote. I was truly dismayed by the fact that we didn't know if the amicus brief was even filed yet. We didn't know that in our executive session. That was a concern of mine. I didn't know how much it was going to cost. Didn't know who we were charging. Well, that's when we got Mr. King, thank you, on the phone, and we asked these questions, and I appreciated the answers. I really did. And I asked, you know, it looks as if this is very political, because every single person on there is Republican, every single one.
But there also are elected officials.
Right? I agree. Right. I understand that. Yeah. I'm just saying, and I said my question in that debate was brought up by the people was this offered to all candidates? If you're listing them as a candidate and that's their farm, did we? And Mr. King said, you should do that. I sent it off to the Democratic chair and said, please send us out and get feedback. That's the response you see today.
Yeah.
It's been a struggle. I mean, for every county that we're put in this position, and what I try to tell people on the phone, and I know they're frustrated. I know a lot of people have lost. I've lost. They've lost. what I'm trying to tell them is, my goal isn't to change the letter behind somebody's name that's an elected official. That's not my goal. My goal is to really get this process down. I think it's better done, perhaps, once we get out of the disaster, so we can still move through. I understand people feel violated, their rights are violated. I can tell you that in a war, when people are sent off to war against their will, that's another violation of a right, right? So we give up certain rights in our lives because of a disaster or because of a cause or what our firm beliefs are in our Constitution. It's not easy. Each one of those are difficult. But I would hope to God that everyone looks at this for years to come and finds a better way to do it than what we had today. That, I think we can all agree on.
A call to question.
Okay. So thanks, everybody, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for expressing and doing what you feel is your responsibility. And thanks to both commissioners for doing their best as we muddle through this, is what it has been since the beginning, thanks to some of the actions.
Point of clarification, you have
So we
two
will
items
call.
before you, H2 and H3. H2 would be ratification of the executive session decision. That is to prepare, file, participate in the civil action, County of Butler et al. Versus Wolf et al. In the U.S. District Court. I believe the question's been called, and that's what you should vote on. An affirmative vote would be to continue moving forward with the lawsuit.
And you all already have a first and a second.
Yes.
On number 2.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, no?
No.
Commissioners, item 3, also ratification of executive session. That would be for the decision reached in the executive session for the county's special counsel to prepare an amicus curiae brief in regard to the U.S. Supreme Court case of DeVito et al. V. Wolf. I would note the decision reached and your vote today is not for the filing of the AC brief at this time, as you've not yet had an opportunity, as Commissioner Boozle properly noted, you've not had a chance to review the brief, but you're simply authorizing special counsel to proceed with the preparation of such a brief for your review.
So moved.
I'll second. Anything further?
I guess my concern there is, and I believe Mr. King addressed it some, that it is a stay and it is still pending in court. And I would defer to the fact that I think that case is similar to our lawsuit. Doing both, I don't know that would really benefit our citizens or our businesses. So I would defer.
All right, we have a motion to second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
I was just going to
Sorry.
mention that I recall in
Sorry.
executive session you agreeing to the amicus brief.
I agreed to proceed to have it prepared. I've not seen it nor read it.
Okay.
That's what
Well,
we're,
neither
that's
of
what
us.
we're voting
Right.
on.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
The vote at this time, an affirmative vote, is to ratify the decision authorizing special counsel to prepare the
Okay.
amicus brief. It has
Right.
not been, as Mr. King has confirmed, it has not been filed, will not be filed without formal action by this board.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, no?
No.
Motion carries. Thank you.
And lastly, I have the acknowledgement of a PIMA audit by Mayor Duschel, CPAs, with authorization of chairman to sign the engagement letter. I ask your approval.
We have a
So
motion.
moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Motion carries.
Approval of budgetary transfers, ratification of personnel transactions, travel request, requisitions, and check register.
So moved.
Second.
Anything further? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no? Motion carries. Suspend the minutes for conference time with the meeting.
I guess the million-dollar question is, do you have an estimate on the cost of this lawsuit to the taxpayers? I mean, even a range? I mean,
We have a-
we have an hourly estimate.
We have an hourly rate of $175 an hour. along to Dylan McCandless and King, who is special counsel, who we approve, there are two
Special counsel.
special counsels.
And
that-
how many hours do you expect to spend?
I have no idea.
Is there a budget you have set?
The county appoints two special counsel, and we have Stepanian and Menchek, and we have the King firm as our two special counsel.
But there's no
And,
budget for this.
We have.
No, wait a minute,
No,
hold
we-
on.
A budgeted amount.
You just said you don't know.
You haven't said
But there
budgeted
is a,
amount.
there is a,
We have a line item.
there is a line item in the
In
budget
the budget,
that typically is for legal costs that are unanticipated.
unanticipated legal
And how
costs
much is that line item?
in our budget.
Can you call up to Ann?
I'm looking
and get
at
that
Ann.
answer? Do you have a,
If I remember correctly, I think it was $50,000.
I believe it's either 40 or 50,000 is the unanticipated legal in the
Thank you.
budget.
Okay.
Okay, do you expect to stay within that range, or not spend that much, spend much more? I mean,
We believe that we will get contributions from other participants in the suit, the other counties. Help us to defer costs.
I would certainly hope so. I mean, we can't go outside the budget that we already have
Yeah.
established. We can't go outside of this established budget.
Right.
If I might, we will be sitting down with the three commissioners before we ever submit a bill. So no bill's been submitted, and before we ever submit a bill, we will sit down with the commissioners, review what's been done, and we all live in this county. Our offices are in this county, and we've been very supportive of the county, and we intend to still be. So we will hope to come to some consensus with the commissioners before any bill is ever submitted. We're not worried about it.
Are other counties retaining legal counsel?
We
I
would,
know you may not be able to speak to that.
I don't know the answer to that question, but their solicitors were in contact, have been in contact with Mr. King, is it my understanding.
Have you heard from any other representatives from those counties who are joining this lawsuit? And I'm talking state representatives, things like that.
Senator Stefano was on the call, Pat Stefano was on the call. There were, Bartolotta was on the call, I believe, or has shared additional support to those counties. Those counties have been in contact with their legislators,
Yeah.
to my
And the
knowledge.
Senate did do a support letter for our suit, supporting our suit.
There was an issuance of a, if I might,
Yeah,
there was the issuance of a press release by the Pennsylvania Senate. Senator Stefano, Bartolomeo, Senator Hutchinson from Butler County, and Senator Pittman, who covers both part of Butler County, supporting the legal action, and so they issued a press release in support of it.
They did not join.
They did not join
Yeah, none of
per
the
se,
Senate.
but they issued a statement in support of the lawsuit.
Now, I know Tom said that you are not seeking any financial gains out of this. So I guess my question is what the end game is. Are you looking to change policy from state Department of Health to how they relate to the county? So you're essentially telling the citizens
Well-
what the end game of this is.
If we were to, had we filed in Commonwealth Court, that would be where I think those issues, and I would actually support further action in Commonwealth Court based on the statutes and what we believe could be typical, could very well be, at least I personally believe, violation of those statutes. But in federal court, again, we're challenging the constitutionality of the orders and more importantly, the arbitrary way in which they were applied.
I believe I communicated previously that the end game was to create reform at the state level, whether it's through policy or process, as to how the state manages future health pandemics without the violation
And-
of one's civil rights.
And
through the process.
while the legal action itself may not lead to that, or may not be that process, or part of that process, I should say, while the legal action itself, but the taking of that legal action and driving that forward, that's the action we hope will somewhere raise attention that these are issues that need to be addressed. But by the same token, we have been denied, I believe, our right, as was definitely indicated, to represent our citizens and our residents. We were denied that right as a county.
I know you all three have collectively agreed about the miscommunication between the state and the county. What would you have handled differently? What would you have done differently if given a little bit of leeway from the governor's office? What do you think possibly could have changed for better communication?
You mean from the state to the county level?
Just internally, what would you guys have done making decisions that would have differed from what the governor's office has done?
Well, we could have been more of a partner in being part of the solution. And you know, communicated what the implications of these orders are on our fellow citizens and businesses. For every executive order that came down, and it was like every other day for a while there, for several weeks, there were adverse implications throughout our county that we had to react to, that there was no way we could be proactive, and we tried numerous times to be proactive, but then the governor would come out with an order that was contrary to that.
Well, and you know, I think that we could have had an opportunity and attempted to do that at this level in communicating with our healthcare officials in the hospital in particular, on multiple calls with emergency management, the healthcare officials in our local community, and our human services director, our director of aging, who has the communication with the, most importantly, where the biggest risk is, who has communication with those congregate care facilities. And those are the places where I think that we had the most opportunity to make the difference had we been able to develop those plans at the local level and even submitted them to the state for approval on how we might go forward. And so we did request yesterday, specifically my question yesterday on the call with the Department of Health and the governor was, will you allow the counties, are you going to collaborate or allow the counties to put together those plans locally to address issues related to contact tracing and particularly in our congregate care facilities? Are we going to be part of that process? The other thing, I'm sorry, Kim.
No.
There's just one other point I forgot to make. I apologize.
No.
And that is that when the governor's office when Allie Doyle from the governor's office called me the night before we were changed to yellow, her question to me was, I need your verbal permission to move from red to yellow. Do you give me your verbal permission to move from red to yellow? And my question to her was, do you ask all counties that question?
She told me yes. She asked me the same exact question.
Yes. And she said, we asked the chairman of those counties that question. That is exactly what she said. We asked the chairman of those counties that question. She didn't ask Washington County that question. The other person from the governor's office who was calling Washington County apparently did not ask that same question. Or at least it wasn't put in those same terms. But then the next thing was, she was very clear, we will not ask your permission to move you from yellow back to red. And so I simply said, thank you, and yes, you have my verbal permission.
What would we have done differently? We would have had an opportunity to target and direct resources to the most vulnerable places throughout our county, needing those resources and PPE and for the staff that work there. we could have created a more safe working environment for facilities that were all competing with the private and public industries for the same PPE. We could have directed resources to our nursing home populations that are our most, that we now know are our most vulnerable populations for this particular virus. We could have had, if we maybe had targeted and we were allowed to be more planning and strategic, we could have maybe kept some of our businesses open. We may not have had such a reaction, a strong reaction, panic and fear, and those are all based on just lack of information, lack of knowledge. When you get information and knowledge, then you have more. It subdues itself. So.
Do we know of any other states, any other municipalities in any other states that are taking legal action against their governors?
I know of cases filed, for example, a congressman in Michigan has filed suit, and a legislator in Illinois not only filed suit but won. He filed, the gentleman in Illinois filed in state court. The congressman in Michigan filed in a federal court. In the state court in Illinois, the gentleman who filed sought an order not dissimilar from ours, saying that he had the freedom to leave his home anytime he wanted, and that no one could order him, a healthy person, to be quarantined. So in that particular case, the court issued an injunction in his favor and found that he was entitled to disobey the Governor Pritzker's order in Illinois that he be home quarantined, much like our order here. And that's one of the differences in this pandemic versus any other pandemic. People who are healthy are being quarantined, as opposed to people who are ill. So I don't know I don't pretend to have all the answers to this thing at all, but the difference is that people who do not have the disease, businesses that are not proven to transmit the disease, people who will act responsibly are likewise being shut down along with healthy people. So again, that's not a political issue, that's a fundamental rights issue. So of people to operate their businesses. So people who sell products in one store are allowed to be open. People who sell the same products in another store are not allowed to be open. You know, and I think what Commissioner Boozle was saying was absolutely right. So, you know, we have somebody's making these decisions, but where we differ is that when those decisions are made, they ought to be made by elected officials who set the rules. There are no rules here, and that's what Commissioner Oshie and Commissioner Guyer were talking about. There are no rules. If you're in a particular business and you're declared to be non-essential, you have no appeal from that. That decision is being made by someone, and there's not even an agreement at the state level. Look at the veto case in the state Supreme Court. There's not even an agreement among the parties up there as to who made that decision, whether it was DCED, whether it was the governor, whether it was the Secretary of Health. So these are decisions being made constantly about everybody, including me, including our law office. We had to shut down. In other states, there have been actions brought where the Texas Attorney General, for example, issued an opinion saying that the governor of Texas had no authority, those are both Republicans, that the governor of Texas had no authority to shut law offices down. They also had a case in Kansas that was brought by 2 pastors and 2 churches, and the federal district court in Kansas said that the governor has no authority to violate the U.S. Constitution with respect to the free exercise of religion, so that they could not shut the churches down. When that happened, Pennsylvania added a category to the essential life-sustaining business list. The category was religious entities. However, they were still subject to the congregate rules in a red zone of no more than 10 people, in a yellow zone no more than 25 people. There are churches here who have shut down. My own church has shut down, and we're watching video services. But there are also churches that have not shut down. There are churches that I'm aware of that are holding congregational meetings, that they're holding services on Sundays. And so the limitation on how many people can, for example, there's a limitation here today on how many people are allowed to come to a public meeting, even in a courthouse, at a governmental meeting. We have government buildings in Butler County that have signs on them that say the public is not allowed to enter. I mean, this is America. You know, these are the people's buildings, the people's government centers. So the rights are, again, it's not Democrat, it's not Republican, it's not any, it's American.
Yeah.
These are fundamental issues in America. So even in a time of a pandemic, somebody has to stand up and say that these things aren't right. And again, I'd invite, I hope that I can convince these two gentlemen back here to join us, or anybody else.
I'm sorry.
Okay, the question,
I'm sorry,
but just a minute, go ahead.
Have you heard anything about moving from yellow to green, and what data would have to be there to do that from the governor's office?
On the call yesterday, they said they were still formulating those.
The largest
Criteria.
portion
They were
that they were
still
looking at was the
formulating that.
tracing capabilities in those areas, but they don't have definitive numbers or indicators.
You're allowed to speak to the reporter? Only you?
They asked me a question.
Okay.
Did they say they would share with you the criteria they would use to move from yellow to green?
No.
They are anticipating being able to do that through the calls that we've established, and we're going to continue with our CCAP association the way we did just the other day for an hour.
Last one I got for you. Nursing homes, obviously, the Brighton situation in Beaver County has probably been a major reason as they haven't moved
Sure.
from red to yellow. Obviously, there's a fear of that could happen here in Butler County, and then on the other side of that, have the county or any of those organizations taken steps to essentially, I don't want to say prevent that, but I know Connecticut is establishing COVID centers. So if a nursing home, tests positive for COVID,
Right.
they go there.
Right.
Have you
So-
heard anything like that?
So the only the information that we have been able to get is the information that we have been able to garner via our relationship with Butler Health System, who many of their doctors are the medical directors for those long-term care facilities. Those long-term care facilities are meeting as, everyone is represented by an association. And so they are meeting and being guided by their associations. So they're trying to follow their guidelines within, their associations and their plans. However, it is my understanding there was a state plan. And yesterday on the call, I heard that that plan had been revised. I didn't see it. The doctor at the hospital believes that he did. There was something that was put out. They indicated on the call yesterday they were going to test all nursing home patients, and I guess.
And staff.
And staff,
That's what
right.
the secretary said.
Now,
Right.
I'm a little bit confused by that action simply because it's diagnostic testing. And again, I would think that diagnostic testing would be done particularly if there were an outbreak, but I mean, you would have to test people every single day to follow that.
Yeah.
You would have to do diagnostic testing. So I think the antibody, they're a combination of the diagnostic and the antibody testing is something that is coming down the line, and the hospital is ramped up to be able to do the antibody testing. The challenge is getting our hands on diagnostic testing.
Just one last question, particularly for Commissioner Guyer. How would you have done this differently to keep businesses open? Like you're contending that people are having their rights violated, not able to run their businesses or go about their lives. What would you have done differently?
Well, I think the constitutional piece is the total shutdown, the taking so much with, as the Constitution language says, with unjust compensation. I think that if we had, as I shared with Tyler, had we known all the information up front, And we knew there were more vulnerable populations of people than others, and they were at the congregate care centers. And we were able to target, and businesses were able to mitigate and implement safety interventions with their employees and the cleanliness of the facility and sanitation and all those factors. We might have been able to, without a complete shutdown, had the operation of a business. And in a free world, you know, business would continue to operate with those interventions in place. And the consumer, meaning the citizens, would have a choice as to whether or not they wanted to go to that restaurant or that store to purchase milk or bread. They would have the choice. That was all denied. That was just completely taken away. And that choice was made by the government. It wasn't made by the people.
Thank you.
Good? All good? They're good.
Okay.
Commissioners, at this point, you're at agenda item number 11. I wish to make two announcements before we go back to public comment.
Okay.
One, there are numerous people here I see present in the room who did not sign in. It's imperative that we have a proper record of the public meeting, and as such, I'd request that if you're here and you've not yet signed in, that before you leave today, that you please come up and put your name down so that we have a proper record of those who were here, participated, or were present. Secondly, I heard one or two people indicate Mr. King responding to questions and/or speaking beyond the 3-minute time limit. I would point out that Mr. King is not present as a member of the general public here today. Rather, he's the designated representative of the law firm of Dillon, McCandless, King, Coulter, and Graham, which you've heard is acting as special counsel for the county, and as such, he's speaking as a county representative for purposes of today's meeting. With that, there are two individuals who've checked to speak to the board and address them with regard to general items. As you've not yet spoken, Mr. Critchlow, you'd have first opportunity to wish to speak. You may if you wish.
Jennifer spoke for us, I believe.
That's
Well,
fine.
thank you.
Okay. Ms. Van Ansdale, you did speak as well. I'd only remind you two things. One, again, a 3-minute limit, and if possible, please don't, I know it's kind of, don't reiterate or regurgitate what's already been said. Try and address new issues or new items or things that have come up since you spoke last. Thank you.
Thank you. I do appreciate Attorney King's legal argument and him reference to me. I do want to reiterate the fact that this is a political puppet show, and I'll tell you what, you were my Exhibit A, and I can't wait to get that, because you know what? We have 2 congressmen in Butler County, ma'am.
Yes, we do.
And you did not ask my congressman, and that's Congressman Lamb. Okay? Number 2, Mr. King referenced one of the political candidates that's on there and his signs in front of his office. And that political candidate also has a challenger. And I can tell you that challenger wasn't asked. So I stand by the fact that the inclusion of these candidates was political, and it was orchestrated by the 2 Republican commissioners that I have before you, which brings me to my new point, and that is the Director of Elections and the fact that we have no independent oversight in the Director of Elections at this point, and I ask for an immediate oversight of an independent third party to oversee our upcoming elections, because I have no faith that these 2 commissioners can do so when we are now in a lawsuit that you have just voted on with 4 candidates. Therefore, I specifically demand and request that we have an independent, outside person oversee the Butler County Department of Elections, and that Ms. Oshie and Ms. Geyer be barred from said elections office. I saw in the Butler Eagle yesterday that Ms. Oshie had a comment that there are tons of ballots everywhere, tons of paper. I do not in any way trust the impartiality of these 2 individuals, and now that Butler County is in business as sanctioned by this county with 4 candidates without the inclusion of their opponents, we can absolutely have no independence in our elections, which is utmost concern whether you are Republican or Democratic. And let me also be clear, the inclusion of the candidates has nothing to do about reopening of businesses, to which we may agree. But the inclusion of the candidates showed your cards, showed your motivation. And for that, I reiterate the fact that I believe it's illegal action and that this county and these two commissioners have cost this county and will cost themselves perhaps their own liberty for their actions. Thank you.
If I may, for purposes of the record, at the last public meeting, Butler County did retain the services of ES&S, Elections Systems and Software Services, to put an individual in the office to serve as the overseer of the office until a new Bureau of Elections chair is hired. And that individual did start, I believe, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So I believe there is an individual down there in charge who is not beholden to the county and is in fact not even a resident of the county, to my knowledge, not even a resident of the Commonwealth. I believe there's no other individuals who signed up to speak, and at this point then I think it's appropriate to seek adjournment.
I missed something from our facilities and operations to thank the Butler Memorial Hospital for over 200 gallons of hand sanitizer that we received.
Right.
And we want to make sure that we thank them and their partnership and their continued efforts with us as our county continues to move forward in getting through this pandemic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Again, I'd request those who did not sign